40 years. And also more recently experienced a severe depressive episode. And so this is, all these expertise is a unique combination. And Andre was kind enough to have, to be the ultra multitasker here, not only doing the Q&A right after our presentation, also with the rector of the university later on, but also there will be a lot of room for questions and discussion later on at the end of our meeting, and this is guided, chaired by Andre. Andre, many thanks for coming over from. Okay.
So let's start.
Okay. So, why do we focus on urban mental health? Now, of course, living in a city is also very challenging in a positive way, but also it can be challenging in a negative way. We know that more and more people are living in the city at the moment. Already more than half are living in an urban environment, and the expectation is that in 2050 almost 70% of the population lives in an urban environment. We also know that urban environments also have an impact on stress levels and also on mental health problems and conditions. And of course we're here in Amsterdam, so maybe we have to zoom in a bit on Amsterdam as well. What we see here are actually the graphs of the Nemesis, and in the Nemesis, but as well as the NASDAQ, so cohort studies, they examined the association between urbanicity and anxiety, depression, and also addiction. And what did they find? Indeed, they found higher prevalence of depression in Amsterdam and also in other big cities. But also there was a clear association over across 6 different cohorts in the Netherlands, showing that urbanicity was associated with higher levels of depressive symptoms. And also the experiencing less safety in the city, and I'm not only talking about the subjective experience of safety, but also, for instance, having experienced a crime or something like that is associated to more depression. And overall, if you take it all together, then in Amsterdam, there seems to be an indication that symptomatology of anxiety, addiction and depression is higher. This is not unique for Amsterdam, we also see this in big cities globally. So, what are the prevalent mental health conditions? Depression, anxiety, addictions are the most prevalent mental health conditions that also have a big impact on the burden, and also prevalent in the Netherlands, and it is associated with very, very high cost on many different levels. And we're facing a challenge because we do have effective treatments, but we do not see an indication that the effect sizes actually become bigger. So we don't see an improvement in the effects of treatment. And then there is also the problem of accessibility. So there are some groups that are actually at a high risk for developing mental health problems and conditions that somehow do not seek treatments or somehow do not have access to treatment. And these kind of things are very clear also demonstrated in the city, even on specific locations in the city. So what is our mission? Our mission is to unravel new pathways to improve urban mental health. And the backbone that we use is complexity. Later on we will explain a bit more why we think this is the right way to go. But it's not only about unraveling new pathways or finding new pathways. We especially want to focus on pathways that we actually can intervene on, that we can actually change. And we also want to model and examine what are the most promising pathways to actually focus on, given that there are so many factors that have an impact on onset and maintenance of our common mental health conditions. But why can you perceive mental health problems and conditions as complex? Now, first of all, it's sort of seen as the result of an interplay between many, many factors. Individual factors like genetic factors, neurobiological factors, emotion, cognition, physiology, and also how they interact with the environment. And the complex part is that all these factors, or at least most of them, they change over time. And another more complex thing is that also these factors change at the moment that people experience symptoms. For instance, if someone has sleeping problems, it can have a big impact, for instance, on the level that you are able to work, and that might even result in losing your job. And that again, having no job is a very well-known risk factor for and maintenance of mental health conditions as well as relapse. And there is the problem about symptomatology. One symptom can trigger the other. For instance, sleeping problems. We had a bit of a hard time sleeping this night. can result in some concentration problems. And I can witness that I actually this morning in the bus I forgot my boots. So I had to buy new ones to be able to present in boots. Yeah, for women it's very important to wear boots to have a presentation. So, the clue is one symptom can actually trigger another symptom, and this continues. And to make it even more complex, these changes over time can be also different per individual. For some people it's a gradual change, for instance going from a good or a healthy state to depression, while for someone else it can be rather abrupt, boom, boom, and you're fully depressed. So there are many, many factors, and they are in the different time frames can have different impacts also per individual. And now the more exciting part is there is a possibility to embrace this complexity. For instance, technology now helps us to study mental health, or what people actually experience during the day. For instance, by using apps and wearables, and for instance by installing passive apps on their phone, so that you have also a good indication of movement and where people are and so on. And we are at a time frame that there is openness to have closer links between these other disciplines. So we are sitting here together with many different disciplines who actually are devoted to spend a lot of time to try to communicate together to make the ball rolling. And this is not only here the case, but also internationally. There is an openness to work together and to focus on new pathways. And we have new approaches that can actually deal with these complex issues. And of course, mental health is not only complex issues. This has also been applied to, for instance, understanding criminal networks or diabetes. Stephen Hawkins said that this century would be the century of complexity, and that's actually quite exciting because this is now, and I think this is an opportunity for all of us to make the next step.
So, here's an example from all of these different factors that in one of the disorders, the common mental disorders that I actually have a lot of experience on, addictions. I was in this European project where one of the ideas was, let's try to, first of all, line out different pathways in addictions, but then also map out different factors that actually are related to addiction. So we sat down, a bit like what we're going to do here, with people who are experts in neurobiology, genetics, social, cultural norms, marketing, how does, for example, the alcohol or tobacco industry influence people. We know there's a lot of psychological factors, emotional processes, cognitive processes that all influence. So we can line them all out. But in the end, you get like a big shopping list of all these factors at different levels, but then, yeah, basically everyone goes back to their own faculty and lab and go studying. So what is really exciting now is that we can do this next step where you actually start modeling the interplay between factors at different levels. And we had a lot of discussions when putting together this research priority area, and we thought this would really be a unique opportunity if we use complexity science as the backbone for this research priority area. And that's for different reasons. For one, we actually are here in the University of Amsterdam in the proud possession of the Institute for Advanced Studies, which is interdisciplinary, and headed by Peter Sloot, one of the speakers right after our opening, who is an international renowned expert on complexity science. So the knowledge is here, the tools are here, so that's really important. Second, if you have a complex problem, and this is for all of the common mental disorders, you need a common language. So if you have sociological factors, genetic factors, neurobiological factors, how are you going to relate these? And that's one of the aims, is to try to create these models, including factors at different levels. And that, we hope, will actually lead to insights on how to develop new interventions. Because, of course, interventions are good for two different reasons. From a theoretical perspective, it's the best way to test causal relationships. So that's really important. And of course, first of all, this is a science center. But second, if you have interventions, of course, it's great if you have a center on urban mental health that you can actually start using them and implement them in society. So that's the second very important pillar of this research priority area center, is to, from the start, also start working with citizens, with stakeholders, to work on interventions and see what the effects actually are on these models. You'll hear more about complexity later on from Peter Sloot. Another really important development, mostly in psychology at the moment, is on symptom networks. And we'll have, again, one of the world experts close by, is Danny Borsboom. He'll give a talk later on in the program. And the interesting thing is, this is at the group level, so you basically have like a new way to look at mental disorders, on how one symptom can actually influence the other symptom. But of course, it's also very interesting to look within a person, how one symptom can actually cause another symptom. And for those of you with a clinical background, that's what clinicians do. Actually, I just saw that my own clinical teacher is right here. So now we call it functional analysis. But now the exciting thing is that the original functional analysis is based on retrospective data. Now you can do it with objective data that you gather with ecological monitoring assessment. And then this may actually lead to new insights into how, for this particular person, we can help and intervene. So that's a rough outline. As already mentioned, Peter Sloot here in the foreground, sitting here. The beautiful Institute for Advanced Studies, where we get people from all of these disciplines out of their faculties, out of their labs, together on Wednesdays, Mental Wednesdays, and sitting together and trying to create models that embrace the complexity and lead to new insights. That's the broader perspective that we have. So back to the mission.
Yeah,
and then we go on with Q&A.
Yes. So I hope, or we hope actually, that today will be a warm welcome from everyone who wants to contribute on finding new pathways. And to be able to have a common language, is important to be aware that this will be housed, and we're very happy that Peter Sloot invited us to be housed in the Institute of Advanced Study. I would now like to invite André Tomlin, to get to the stage, because we will probably he will ask us a lot of very complicated questions, and thereafter there's of
After
course,
that, there's question time for you.
yes.
Hello everyone, my name's Andre. Some of you might know me as the Mental Elf. That's a pun. I hope you get it. Mental elf, mental health. So this is really exciting for me to be here and to be in this amazing 19th century classical Roman Catholic Church for this amazing launch. And I wanted to ask Claudia and Reinhard, why? Why are you launching a Centre for Urban Mental Health here in Amsterdam in 2019?
I think this is a sign that we have to sit down. So let's do that.
Well, I think there's basically two important reasons. The one is that, as mentioned in the presentation, urban living is on the rise, which leads to a higher prevalence of the common mental disorders, probably of all sorts of disorders, but those are the most prevalent, so with many people affecting them. And we don't think that there's like a different species of anxiety or depression or addiction in a city. It's more that it's an accumulation of risk factors. So if you want to study complex interactions between risk factors, in a way this is the place to be. And of course that only kind of focuses on, say, the risk negative side, but why do people come to cities? Because there's tons of opportunities, education, so there's also a positive side, of course, to it. But when it comes to mental disorders, of course, you're more looking at how, for some people, those opportunities actually, they can't take them at that moment, or it leads to problems.
And another reason is that we do have effective treatment for anxiety, depression, addiction, but the effect sizes, they're sort of stuck. There is no increase over decades, despite of a lot of new insights, or even not new anymore, insights that we have done in the past 30 to 40 years. So I think it's also important to see how we can improve the effects of treatment and also improve the effects of preventive intervention. So, and then it's also logical to focus on the larger group, because more and more people are living in an urban setting, and to see, okay, how are all these factors intertwined, and where do we have the highest chance to intervene? Is it here, or do we have to do a combination? So we have to simply do better.
I think the second part is, one is, say, opportunities. The other part is, we now have better tools. So with development of computer science, complexity, big data, so you basically have tools to investigate these type of complex interactions in a way that before there was just simply no way to get these factors at different levels together in a meaningful way, other than just descriptive.
Yeah, we're going to get some examples of that, I think, later on in some of the other talks. But could you maybe give us an initial example of how complexity science works to solve the sorts of problems that you see in urban settings?
How complexity science works to solve it? Yeah, I think actually before we can solve it, we have to understand what are the pathways and how are they changing over time, and on what time frame. So is it fixed, or is it changing all the time? So I think it would be too soon to say we can solve it and this is how we do it. What we try to do, and therefore this substantial impulse is crucial. We have to invest in doing research, in finding out okay, what pathways are there, how do they interact with other, and where are the opportunities for change. And Why do we think this might make sense and it might be promising? Because it has, for instance, also been used to understand criminal networks and also to find out, okay, what is the best way to make sure that these criminal networks actually are sort of, to change it, to decrease the criminality, for instance, in Amsterdam. So you see in other fields that this might make sense. The same holds for diabetes. There is also now a model now on diabetes that might give us completely different target points than what we thought of before. So I think we have to go back to the drawing table, and that's actually what we aim to do, and to embrace the complexity of urban mental health, and in this way, step by step, work together on finding new pathways that we can actually develop new interventions on micro levels, or on an individual level, for instance with psychological interventions, but also on macro level, like on city level or national level.
It's really exciting to see such an interdisciplinary group of people here in the room. And I think for me that's one of the most exciting things about this new centre, is that you're bringing together very diverse groups of people to work together. Can you give us some examples for people following online, for people in the room, of what you're actually planning to do with the centre over the next few years?
Yeah, so as Claudia just explained, there are already initiatives looking at the complexity, and the diabetes model, for example, has been or is under development in the same Institute of Advanced Studies. Claudia is working on model depression. I was in this group which I just mentioned, with all these different factors for addiction, but now you really want to make this next step and work on models, and also there with network modeling, for example. First attempt has been made to model out how symptoms of addiction can actually cause each other, but also we know that many people suffering from addictions also develop depression. So the symptoms don't just stop at the border of the disorder. There's also, by some of the people in the room, initial attempts to work on complex models of addiction. So, it's not that we next Monday start from scratch totally. But, there's good hope that we will develop these models further. But I also want to emphasize, it's not like we're first, for 5 years, only going to do modeling and then go to the world, because I think it's really important that from an early stage, you get relevant data in, you examine it, if you intervene here, what happens to, initial complex model, etc.
Yeah. And more concretely, later on, we have the pitches of 6 research projects, including PhD students, that actually are very specific projects that work on urban mental health. And the interesting part about it, that they actually range from working on micro level, so on individual level, to macro level, so more on societal level. So
from young to old. So we really try to start with variety of approaches. And then again, the kind of unifying language will be trying to model everything together. So that's also why it's important that, we get together on a regular basis and not just everyone working on its little piece solitarily.
And we know that about half of the people in this room, from the slide earlier on, will experience some kind of mental health difficulty at some point in their lives. Obviously, those people are central to this work. How are you going to involve people with lived experience in the centre?
Yeah, I think this is a very important part, and immediately from the start, this was already included. So, and also, for instance, we now have the official kick-off, and we also welcomed people with lived experience, but also, for instance, patient organizations, also organizations like mine that actually represent people with lived experience. And we're warmly inviting everyone to contribute and to come up with all kinds of ideas. So it's a 4th and go, and I think this is crucial. So,
And what do you hope to get out of today? Purely selfishly, what would you like to walk away from this meeting with?
For me, it has two parts. On the one hand, we first worked on the proposal and then established a board with 6 people from 3 faculties. So it was very good and positive working on how we're going to develop this program, but it's very small. And now we're out in the world and, with different projects which will actually start in the near future. So it's kind of step out. Now the second part is we really not only want to center on models and science, but also on interventions in the urban context. And we actually designed a specific work package on collaborations between stakeholders and us, the science part, to study and develop interventions. And already we have a first co-financed study which will be an intervention in low SES neighborhood school interventions, where we also look at effects in families, rather triple down effects of these interventions. So that's a start, but actually I do hope that either directly here, if there are stakeholders, or later through social media, that this will be the beginning of a big adventure called Marine.
Yeah, I think I have to be selfish, eh? You said
Yes.
No, I think the most important part of today is, of course, it would be really nice if people get excited about what we're doing and get excited about the idea that mental health is the priority here. And not only that that is the priority, but I would really like it if people go back at the end of the day and think like, we really want to contribute. So it has to be a warm welcome. And this is maybe for people who are not from Amsterdam, not only an Amsterdam initiative. We also plan to initiate an international urban network so that we can actually make sure that we get the ball rolling. So maybe if I summarize it, it would be wonderful if we somehow together get the ball rolling.
Nice. I thought you were going to say lots of positive comments about your lovely new boots.
Oh yeah, that would be nice as well. It's also important.
So finally, urban mental health is the hashtag for people with phones. I presume some of you have got phones. Do go onto Twitter and share your thoughts at hashtag urban mental health. And we're live streaming on YouTube as well, so people will be watching this now. What do you want from people who are following online?
Comments, questions. I think at the end we'll have time for questions from the room, but also from incoming questions and comments.
And ideas for opportunities, ways to connect. So, yeah, please.
Yep.
Positive and negative comments. So yes, let's open it up. Does anybody in the room have a question for Claudia or Reinhard?
It's a very interesting presentation, and listening to youth I've developed, it makes me run a bit of sequence of thoughts. So when I try to focus on the presentation, I try to emphasize on urban mental health, I get somehow the message that urban health can be healthier. So maybe nowadays it's still unhealthy and we have to push it to a more healthy, towards more healthy. So also I get indirect the message that rural living is healthier. So I've seen programs around where they try to take components of rural and village areas and to implement them into the urban setting. Like housing blocks with a central garden where there are collective activities, also where you can develop some agriculture, so that these features of the rural area where there's more social cohesion and more a collectivistic lifestyle to implement it in the urban setting to go towards that boost of the urban mental health? What's your vision about that?
Well, I have two reactions here. The first is I think it's really important to also learn lessons from healthier environments, which can either be rural or maybe some cities or areas where it actually works. The other thing is that we have to be aware that there's not a simple causal relationship here, because it's part of it may be negative influences of noise, pollution of the city, but part may also be selection effects. And so the cities are magnets, and also there's actually also some evidence that more vulnerable people may actually go into cities. So on the one hand, I totally agree, and I think it is important to learn lessons not only focused at the individual, but also at city planning. And we actually had a first meeting with the mayor of Amsterdam, Femke Halsema, who visited the Institute for Advanced Studies. And she was also very keen on, having a dialogue on the type of things we learn in the center for future city planning. So I think this is key. But at the same time, in the back of the head, there's also these other factors.
Yeah.
Okay, any more questions very quickly? Yes?
Is there an example of other urban mental health centers in the world, or are you the first to initiate this?
Yeah, there are indeed other urban mental health centers, but they usually focus on one topic, for instance, design and architecture, or for instance, urban mental health from an epidemiological perspective. So an urban mental health center at this, like in this way, with also a common language, like what will be presented later on, so the complexity approach, we didn't identify yet. Although we, of course, now exploring more and more cities to find out what is going on there, and there is also some movement in that direction, so we're more than willing also to make an international network of that. And there is also something completely different that is called Thrive. It's actually a social movement that is focused on, for instance, decreasing stigma for mental health problems and mental health conditions, as well as finding out of the box interventions. This is, for instance, now rolled out in London, in New York, in Edinburgh, and so on. But what is lacking there, that there is actually no scientific information, there is no, whether this actually does make sense, whether it really helps people who are suffering from mental health conditions, whether it does good or maybe even have adverse effects. And that's quite complex to do, and this is also something we plan to, we will try to find a way to give empirical information so that you can actually guide these policy interventions. And this is very concrete because Thrive will also be on the agenda of Amsterdam, and we're now discussing this with, for instance, the GGD and GGZ Nederland. Sorry, it's a very Dutch word.
And the community of Amsterdam, of course.
Fantastic, thank you. We've got lots of amazing talks, so it's time to move on. But yeah, thank you for chatting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So next on the program, I already mentioned his name a couple of times in the Dutch way, Peter Sloot, if you prefer Peter Sloot, Director of the Institute of Advanced Studies, renowned expert on complexity science, which also happens to be his chair here at the University of Amsterdam. So Peter, we're very happy you could take the time to present here on our backbone.
But this thing works. There we go. Okay, so yeah, it's my pleasure to introduce to you some thoughts that we are having with regard to complexity science and urban mental health. Okay. I should have, this is work. It's not working. I need some help here, I guess. So I see it switch here, but now that doesn't work. So I guess I need some help from the technical guys, which I'm not. Let me try this again. No, it's not. Yeah, okay, good. So, when we talk about mental health, of course, we talk about our brain in its environment, and we kind of want to understand how these things are linked together. So, thinking about our brain, we could say that our brain is one big information processing entity, right? So, we get all this input, we get things that we see, the things that we smell, things that we feel, touch, and hear. And all these things somehow get integrated into our brain, and then we act to that. And our action actually then again influences what we are observing sometimes. So the brain is one big sensory thing, and we have these 5 senses that we have to deal with. And if time permits, I might be able to mention the 6th sense later on. So what is this brain doing? So it is, as you all know, we have these neurons, and we have quite a lot of them. About 100 billion of the neurons in our brain that each have like 10 to the power 4, 10,000 connections. So that adds up to this massive number, which is totally meaningless if you look at the size, 10 to the power 15 synaptic connections. And that's what we have to deal with. And we have way more brain cells than the primates have. And so that might be an indication why we are not while we are doing the things that we can do. The thing is that the brain uses quite a lot of energy. It uses about 20% of the total energy is sitting here, so it uses about 100 watts all the time. It's like a light of 100 watts is actually the energy that your brain consumes. So that's why you still need to eat a lot while you're sitting still like this. Now the thing is that the world is getting more and more complex. The amount of interactions and the actions that we need to act on is getting more and more complex. So it's not just that we just sit here and the impressions are still the same. No, things are changing and the brain needs to adapt to that. But we already have that. Well, we have no more. There's no more. This is it. The brain that we had 200,000 years ago, when we say the start of humanity, if you like, that's the same brain we have now. Of course, it has evolved, there's things changing, but the amount of neurons is basically the same. So, when we think about that, when we were hunter-gatherers, we consumed about 300 watts. So the total environment in which we operate, including ourselves, was consuming about 300 watts. And that's what we what we needed to make a living, to survive. You survive, right? Nowadays, living in an urban environment, there's so many more things. We now consume about 11,000 watts. And so it's the 11,000 watts scale that we have to operate in. But it's the same brain, right? So we have still the same, I would say, limited resource that has to deal with this massive scale of changes that happened. So we look at this guy here, he's doing, he's reading, he's listening, he's navigating the traffic. There's this insane amount of things that he's doing at the same time, with the very same brain that the people here were doing, from a physiological point of view. But the question is, can we scale like that? Is this really, maybe something has to give. It has to give away. Maybe something will actually end up with some kind of limited plasticity. So, and I think that the fact that we see so many, the increase in mental health might be one of the effects of this exponentially more complex world that we live in. And this number that Claudia mentioned, 1 in 5, is kind of, it was actually this morning on the news. It's, well, first of all, I cannot completely believe it. It would be, just look around. 1 in 5, there would be a lot of people that actually suffer from depression at this point in time. And it could well be, I don't know, but it could well be that there's a physiological reason for it. That the physiological reason is just this limit of plasticity of our brain going from 300 watt to thousands of watts. But if you look at where those mental health issues occur, then most of them are somehow linked to what's happening in cities. So it's living and working conditions, work environment, it's the local healthcare services, it's the housing. All those things are is where the mental health aspects will play a major role. So that's why I guess what Reinhard and Claudia were saying, that's why we focus on the city aspects. So talking about cities, we have to think a bit more about that. We have to realize what is a city. And that's a research that's booming very, very hard now, very, very fast, I would say. It started with Jane Jacobs, who said that real cities present situations with several dozen quantities all varying simultaneously and in complex connected ways. So here you have the complex thing again. And the message is that there's something strange happening in cities, and this might be relevant for a study that we're going to pursue in the coming years. What happens is that if you double the size of the city, then the economic productivity per individual increases with about 15%. And this is a strange thing. So if I take you out of Amsterdam, I put you in London, then on average your economic productivity increases with 15%. So there is some kind of efficiency in the scaling of the city. And people started to study that ever since 1975. And a beautiful work by Louis Bettencourt and Jeffrey West came up with the following scaling law. I won't go into the equation, but if you just look at the scales here. So if you double the size of the city, right, and you look at individuals, then what you will see that per individual, per capita, 27% more patents. And this is a study of 300,000 cities, so it's a pretty well, statistically pretty good. The GDP increases to 15%. Serious crimes increases 16%. New AIDS cases, so the infections decreased to 23%. Housing employment basically stays the same. And there's an efficiency in things like in infrastructural networks, like gasoline stations and road services. So there's something special about cities. There's some kind of self-organization principle that seems to have an efficiency that we need to understand. But these things, this city leads to what I would like to call urban entropy, because it leads to more crime, it leads to more pollution, it leads to more noise, it leads to reduced living space, and it leads to segregation. And all these things are indicators and determinants, if you like, of mental health. So cities are good for economic scale, but they have a dark side, if you like. And the dark side is that you have more crime, more pollution, more noise, more reduced, etc. So that's the reason why we need to really understand the individuals in the city as an integrated system, if you like. So we need to connect those dots. And a lot of the research, if you look at mental health, a lot of it is totally counterintuitive. And it's very much, at least for me, I'm not a psychologist, so for me, at least it's very, very counterintuitive. And all kinds of things. So there's an example of the NUN study, where they looked into a correlation between the pathology of the brain and mental disorders, and they actually found that it was disconnected. So pathology which was indicated for Alzheimer actually didn't fit well with psychological tests they were doing. And so what are these things then? What are these hidden processes? We don't know. And we need to kind of figure out new ways to do that. And one way is to really study it all the way from the molecular level to the social level and all the interactions that go in between, which is what urban mental health, I guess, is about. So I want to share with you 3 lessons from complexity science. And I think that these lessons might be helpful for the research that we're going to do in the coming years. First of all, nothing happens in isolation. So whatever we talk about, whatever we think about, everything is connected to everything, and everything feeds on everything and feeds back on everything. And sometimes, when we talk about complex systems, it doesn't make sense to talk about cause and effect, because we cannot unravel them, because it's really the chicken and egg thing that we're talking about. So we have to deal with this circular causality, if you like, that's in there. So nothing happens in isolation. As a consequence, it has many consequences, but I think the third one, don't trust your Gaussian statistics, I see Johan smiling here, is an important one. This basically means that if you want to understand the complex system, throwing AI systems at it is not going to help you at all. Because AI systems, they assume Gaussian distributions and it's not there. So that's an important thing to note. We can talk about that later, I guess. So all the processes that we are studying in complex systems, but also in mental health diseases, are very much not Gaussian, are very much have different type of distribution. And that's because of the street building. Okay, so what is a complex system? There are many different definitions of it. I just want to share with you the two that I favor myself. One is that, well, it's complex, so it's not simple. It basically means, this is the crucial thing, the moment I reduce it to its components, I actually lose what I'm looking for. Right? So the moment I want to understand the system and I just pull it apart, like we've been doing in physics all the time, we hit on it until we find the quarks. But at the moment we do that, we actually lose the big picture. So we need, of course, to understand the components, but the moment we only look at the components, we don't understand the bigger picture anymore. And the other aspect of it, there are components interacting with each other, we produce this collective behavior. But the other component is that these components interact with themselves, but also with the environment that they create themselves. And so you get all those feedback loops, which means this cause and effect gets lost. So the two examples you see here is a flock of starlings, and why they flock is actually to protect themselves from there's a hawk here. So that to protect themselves, of course they don't think about these things, and even each bird in their flock doesn't even know that it's doing that thing, but together they have this macroscopic collective behavior that protects them. So these beautiful patterns are a collective outcome of individual behaviors. Just looking at the individuals will not give me those microscopic patterns. Now the second thing is about our immune system. There's a long story there, but I think our immune system is one of the most beautiful, the most really complex systems that we can think of. And has been evolved over 350 million years if we talk about the adaptive immune system, which is constantly adapting to its environment for 350 years, doing co-evolution of the immune system itself and its environment. And it could well be that mental health also is like a co-evolution of ourselves in our environment. And can we quantify that? Can we study it? And one of the aspects of complexity science is that this collective behavior, we call that, they give rise to new phenomena, and we call that process, we call it emergence. So, we have neurons, the neurons give us all kinds of thoughts, but then the question is, how much of the thought is there in one neuron? Which is a stupid question to ask, right? But then how much of the thought is there in two neurons? 10, 1,000, 100,000, 1 billion. Okay, we know that in 100 billion there are thoughts. Where do we go through that transition? Can we identify? Do we know that? We don't know. We have no clue. So there are thoughts in 100 billion neurons, but where do they occur? It might well be that this is the wrong question. We don't know. But we should ask ourselves. We should ask ourselves what's happening where, or what is the scale of things? When do we go to this transition from things that are disconnected and not producing a collective behavior to something that suddenly produces collective behavior, which is this emerging process, which is a thought? So we need to ask ourselves those questions. The same question is, how wet is one molecule of water? Again, a strange question. But, many of them will create wetness. But wetness is an emerging properties of many of those. But I don't find that in one molecule. So it's again looking at this connectivity of things that is the field of complexity science. So in order to do that, we need to really have this understanding of this upward, downward, circular causation that's happening. And so it goes across all spatial scales, all temporal scales. It is indeed like, your environment has an influence on things that are happening on a molecular level, and the way back, which is a remarkable thing. And we don't know. We just don't know how to do these things. These are all foundational questions. How do we unravel those connectivities? How do we unravel those circular causalities? But we need to do that. We need to understand that in order to understand this microscopic relation. Lesson 2. Underneath all complex systems that we have seen so far, there are networks of information. In network information sharing, networks of information storage, and networks of exchange of information. And information can be anything, right? That can be, one molecule that triggers another molecule to do something, or a gene regulatory network, or it can be a social network where social messages come across. So, networks are crucial things. Here's a network, I won't go into this one. But the particular thing that I want to share with you is that all the networks that we have looked at, the molecular networks, the social networks, you name it, they all have a structure that looks like this and not like that. That means what this is the number of links. So a network has, here a network, there's a connection here, so it has a set of links to its neighbors, and if it's just count as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so this here, the K would be 5. So you would expect some kind of normal distribution. There are a few with a few links, and there are a few with a massive amount of links, and there's somewhere in between. Everything is happening. That's not the case. All the complex networks, even the networks in your brain, they have a different shape. They have this shape. And that means, this is the reason why simple data analysis and linear regression process models will never work for the complex systems. You need different approaches. It's too technical to go into the detail here. Again, we find those networks everywhere, from metabolic networks to, this is work that we did ourselves on HIV networks, interconnecting between the immune system and the HIV virus. We find them in drug networks. You already mentioned the cannabis production network. We find those things everywhere, and once we have identified them, we can play around with them, right? We can ask ourselves what if questions. We can say, what if we would change this or that in that network? And that might give us a feeling of what kind of interventions we could do to steer the outcome of those networks. So in the last 4 minutes, I just want to share with you 2 recent discoveries, which I think might play a crucial role for the future of some of the research that we will be doing in the Center of Complex Systems. Now, I don't know if this is still visible. So one thing we discovered is that, which is I think a very remarkable thing, is that the emerging property of the network, whether it is a gene regulatory network that produces a protein, or whether it's an opinion network that produces the general opinion, that the emerging property is not driven by the ones that have most connections, or the ones that have less connections, but it's driven by somewhere in between. And this is quite remarkable. You would expect that the influencers, for instance in the social network, are the ones that have most connections. Well, it seems if you really look in the details, it's not like that. So the outcome of the network is not driven by the highly connected ones. It's not driven by the lowly connected ones, but it's driven by the ones in between. So it's not Oprah Winfrey who determines our opinion, neither me, but it's somewhere in between. Okay, there's some animations here that will actually highlight that, but for time I'll actually skip this one. So that's important. That's an important thing that we need to think about. Why is that? It's a long story for that. Mathematically, we understand it. We have validated against neural networks. It's correct. We have validated against Amazon recommendation networks. And we have validated against many others. So it seems really to be like that, which is an interesting discovery, I think. Another discovery, that is the second one and also the last one, is that, and I think this is maybe the most important one, that is that networks that have this scale-free behavior that I showed you, there's not a normal distribution, but this scale-free distribution, that those networks are resilient with respect to noise. So that means if I rewire something in that network, in your brain network, or in your genetic network, if we rewire a little bit, it might actually be that it produces even better results, or faster, or more efficient. Up to a certain level, if you disturb it too much, it will collapse. So, this is remarkable. This might be the reason why nature invented networks in the first place. Just imagine that a small mutation would directly make you, kill you. If a small mutation would directly kill you, if there's no kind of correction mechanism, if the dependency of your networks is very sensitive to small disruptive, small changes or small errors, if you like, then your network would collapse. So the fact that that's not happening is pretty interesting. So it seems that complex networks, people in their environment, people with their interaction with other people, but also the brain in interaction with this whole system, it seems that it's very resilient for small changes, up to a certain level, and then it will collapse. And understanding that point is the point that we want to look at. And, well, let's skip this one. What we can find is that this information processing that I start with, I need one more minute, this information processing that we started with, that the brain is an information processing thing, it seems that information processing is happening in what we call at some kind of critical point. And so, I will not go into the details, but it seems that if you look at the connectivity of the network operating and processing information, particularly in the visual and the auditory system, it seems that that's happening at this kind of critical transition between completely ordered and disordered system. This is again a thing that comes from complexity design. We don't really understand what's going on here, but I think it's a very interesting thing to challenge, to study. Anyway, so what complexity design gives us is important. It gives us concepts on emergence, it gives us concepts like self-organized criticality, that tells us things about early warning signals when systems, complex systems might collapse. It tells us something about resilience of complex systems. It tells us, it gives us scaling laws, it gives us signals for tipping points. So that is the kind of tools and methods that complexity science brings to the field of urban mental health. Now in the last -1 minute, I'm going to just share with you 2 things because I think it's too cool to leave it. So, and this is just, it's got nothing to do with the real research I'm talking about now, but it's something to tease your mind a bit. So, a very quick peek into the future. Remember I spoke about the 5 senses. Well, what about if there are 6 senses? What about if there are 6 senses? It seems that there are. And this is a totally scary, wild thing, and I don't know where that's going to lead us, and I don't know what it means for urban mental health, but it might mean something for urban mental health. There's a recent study going on where they looked at the sensitivity of the reaction in our brain as a function of the magnetic field of the Earth. And so, like pigeons, we seem to be more sensitive to that than we ever thought. So there is some rudimentary thing still happening in our brain that allows us to feel the Earth magnetic field. What would that mean? Would it have an effect on our behavior? We don't know. But realizing that, I think, is an interesting thing. New discovery, totally cool. I have no idea what it means, but it's pretty cool. And the final thing is, well, we talk about the brain and how sensitive it is to its environment. Well, the thing that is most sensitive is, of course, coherence in quantum systems. There is a very intensive debate going on whether our thought process should be described more like a classical system, like a quantum state, so that our brain is actually constantly switching from one quantum state to another quantum state. Whatever that means, I don't know. There's pretty good, decent research underneath this. Still foundational, there's much good mathematics and modeling going on there. I have no idea what it means for urban mental health, but I think it's good to share. Okay, thank you very much.
I'm afraid there's a bit of a critical transition at the moment because the boss of the university is waiting to get on stage. So I'm sorry, but if you do have questions, maybe you can wait a bit. Postpone till after the presentation of Johan Bollen. And now I would warmly invite the rector of our university And also André Tomlin. We are deeply honored that Director found time to, not to present, but just to do a very low-key question and answer. And I do like to ask, so please sit down. I do like to mention also a bit on the background. You're not only rector, but you were also dean of the Faculty of Science at our university, VU University, but also a professor on a completely different field. So I do like to mention that, given this is completely also interdisciplinary center, and the professorship is on material physics and nanoelectronics at Leuven University. Later on, with all kind of other things. And I also would like to mention that I actually didn't know it, that she was also in the governing board of the Europe Institute for Innovation and Technology. And that might be of high importance maybe as well for also this urban mental health center. So André, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. It's lovely to have you here.
It's a pleasure to be here, and the introduction was over.
I will give you the mic.
So yeah, I wanted to start by asking you, why have you made this substantial investment in urban mental health? Why have you created this new research priority area?
Actually, I myself come from quite an interdisciplinary background, and what I learned and saw around me is that these environments can be extremely inspiring. So I think for the UvA it's not completely new. There have been already initiatives in this direction, but I find this a really very nice way to explore what can be done in a topic which is very relevant and very important. So I look forward to very nice research.
And what would you consider to be substantial results from this centre, let's say in 10 years' time?
It's always difficult to predict, but what I would hope is that this urban mental health center is top of the bill in science, in research results, also in education. Maybe we did not talk about that, but we can do later, and we're still a little bit far away. I do hope it also leads to new medical practices, new solutions in that area. And I strongly believe there will be also spillovers to completely other areas, just because of the way we do research, they are local research, and also the fundamental research paradigms. And that's why I'm also happy that the Institute for Advanced, the EIS Advanced Studies is also a part of this.
And from your perspective, as this centre is launching today, and as it's kind of emerging with this new field, bringing together all these different people working together, what do you think are the key elements that they need to consider?
It all starts with a great ambition, because that sets the stage and makes every researcher, every scientist look forward and not backward to the own discipline, forward to a wealth of new possibilities. And I do believe also that the creating together the research questions will be like give the lead to where to go to. Investigate whether the way you have been doing research all the time, whether this can be changed, or that there can be an add-on or new insights how to do this, to really look into the complexity of this system. I do believe that will be interesting. So it starts with discussion, it starts with respect for each other's disciplines, it starts with getting the right questions out, and then just doing research. Yeah.
And it's so important in mental health, isn't it, that we have people working together from very different disciplines. It's that interdisciplinarity that's key. What would you recommend to the centre in making sure they make a success of that?
Well, as I said, have the right discussions, then it will come out of respect, not with already the next publication in mind, because that's very often pushing you back in the discipline, in your own discipline. So try to get a little bit above that and see what can be done in a further future. And I think the inspiration that scientists get from fellow scientists is actually the real mechanism. I mean, it just meeting, people discussing and being ambitious, and also, yeah, very, very happy with their own way of doing research, very eager to do research. That's how it works. It starts with people.
That's great. Thank you very much for joining us.
Now you can have all the questions, the answers to your questions. Much more. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, thank you very much. I think now it's time to head on to the last presenter before we have a break. Maybe we have to try to, yes. I'm going to introduce Professor Johan Bollen. And Johan Bollen is Professor of Informatics at Indiana University. And he's co-director of the Center for Social and Biomedical Complexity. He also has a relation with the Netherlands because he also worked as a fellow at Wageningen University to work on, for instance, critical transitions in resilience. And we're really excited that Johan was kind enough to come all the way from the States and give a presentation here. And yeah, I have a bit of a sense that many people who are actually working in interdisciplinary fields somehow are also multi-talented. Because I think you're also almost a professional DJ, right? Yes. So, and it's very interesting because many people we asked before, how can I introduce you? Many of them were actually multi-talented. So it's very interesting to have a professor on informatics that as well is like almost a professional DJ. So maybe you come over once a year and play also in the nightlife.
You can hire me for all of your weddings.
Yeah, it might be very good for mental health as well, right? Okay, go on. Stage is yours.
Okay, great. Well, first of all, I want to thank the organizers for inviting me to this blissful day. It's also really weird to give this presentation in a church. As an atheist, I'm afraid I'm going to be struck by lightning or something like that. It's not working yet. Well, I'll just use the keyboard. That's fine. Okay, so today I'm going to talk a little bit about our research efforts in sort of this space of urban mental health, if you can call it that. My background is actually, my PhD is in experimental psychology, but I specialize in machine learning and robotics, so my daughter calls me a fake psychologist. Much of the work that we do nowadays has been inspired by my colleagues at Wageningen University. We're very interested in looking at whether some of the social media analytics that we do could be applicable to studying critical transitions in mental health, for example, the development of anxiety disorders and depression, etc. So I'll give you a very quick overview of at least two research areas that we've been quite active in that respect. I don't have to mention this, but I'm also always staggered by these numbers, so I wanted to share them with you. Apparently, 50% of the world's population has internet access, and about 42% of the world's population is an active social media user. I'm sure the social media companies kind of play up these numbers a little bit, but still, 42%, that's staggering. And it's not just any 42%, it's actually 40%, almost half of the world's population uses social media through their mobiles. And so as a DJ, this is the stuff of my nightmares. And I experience this all the time, especially when I go into sort of the deep Afro house stuff, so when people start to tune out. And it is undeniable that social media has become a major factor in how we establish social relationships, how these social relationships evolve. And I would say that for most of us, we're well past the Dunbar number, and most of us are socialized to a large degree through these social media platforms. And I think when it comes to social media, there's some good and some bad news. So the good news, I would say, is that, well, more is better, right? So we're capable now of establishing social relationships well beyond linguistic and geographical boundaries. I live in the US, but a good part of my family still lives in Limburg. And so we stay in touch through social media, so that's a good thing. It keeps me connected, keeps us healthy. And as human beings, we need social relationships. In fact, there was a recent analysis done where they offered people money to quit Facebook. And I think the amount that most people would take to quit Facebook would be about between $30 and $50 a month. So that's an enormous amount of value that we all derive, or an estimated amount of value that we all derive from social media. So that's the good news. The bad news, on the other hand, is that social media seems to be making us ill. It's not good for our mental health, and especially for there's some good indications that adolescents suffer tremendously from the nefarious effects that social media has on their mental health. And the statistics are quite damaging, I would say, very disconcerting. If you look at sort of the rise of if you look at the diagnosis rates, for example, for depression, as reported by Blue Cross Blue Shield, which is a private health insurer in the United States, you'd see the age bracket between 12 and 7, there was a 63% increase between 2013 and 2016. I'm not saying that social media is necessarily implicated in this, but it's not an entirely crazy idea. In fact, in one of our papers, and I agree this is a shameless plug, but nevertheless, and sort of picking up on what Peter Slot was talking about just now, is that there's actually good reasons to believe that these very skewed redistributions are in social networks where some people have very many connections, but most of us have very few connections. So these very skewed distributions are inherently causative of, I would say, dysfunctional social comparisons, and that could be a factor that causes social media platforms to be called depressogenic or causative of mental health issues by mere virtue of existing because of the network topology that naturally emerges from these networks. So that's bad. But at the same time, there's also an opportunity. And I quit Facebook and Twitter, and I recommend that you do it. I mean, it's actually a good thing. It's made me a little happier, I think, because I don't have to watch my friends on vacation. And, oh my God, they're so beautiful, and their girlfriends are great, and they're on a boat. I still want most of us to remain on social media, because as a scientist, it offers an amazing opportunity that hundreds of millions of people right now oversharing the most minute details of their daily lives on an ongoing basis, like what they eat, what they experience, their feelings, their friends, what they think about politics, who they're going to vote for, whether they're going to have a beer or a glass of wine. Billions of individuals, in fact, oversharing everything they experience continuously on social media. So that's great. We love that data. The nice thing about the data is also that it's longitudinal, which means that for most users, we have 4, 5, perhaps even 8 years of continuous data, of continuous reporting on their lives. In addition to that, we have a lot of the data is geolocated, so we know where you're having that glass of wine, where you're claiming to be on that jet ski with your beautiful girlfriend. And if you combine that with sort of advances in machine learning and natural language processing, we have a wealth of data and tools at our disposition to study mental health issues at a scale that was previously unimaginable. So I'm not talking just about detection, but sort of using the content of these posts for the detection of mental health issues. I think with this longitudinal data, we can also look at the dynamics, namely how mental health issues evolve, both at the individual level as well as at the collective level. When we're talking, for example, about urban environments, but we can also start to think a little bit from sort of the complex systems perspective at sort of not just the descriptive and explanatory models of how mental health issues actually come about, and then of course that leads to the ability to mitigate them, which is something I'm really interested in. So today I'm going to throw a lot at you, by virtue of not being able to decide what exactly to talk about today, because we have a lot of things going on. And so I'm going to talk about 2 things. The first of them is a demonstration of the amazing power of the social media analytics in studying things that were previously impossible to study. In particular, how a naturally occurring human emotion evolves over time, namely the typical time scale, the typical band through which they evolve. And then second, how we can study the prevalence and the dynamics and the geography of mood disorders using social media. So first, I don't know whether many of you are aware of this little trick, but I've been using it all the time, and it's actually quite effective. So the mood regulation is a very important component of mental health. And it's good to regulate your emotions. And there's a very simple and well-studied technique for emotional regulation called affect labeling. And what it consists of is simply putting your feelings into words. It's choosing a label and then expressing your feelings in terms of that label. Not something like, I feel like I was stabbed in the heart with a dagger, etc. That evokes too much imagery, it's bad. But something like, I am nervous, or I am sad. Just one label, a simple expression, just put your feelings into words. And it works. It's actually been shown to very rapidly down-regulate negative emotions and emotions as a result of fear towards phobias, etc. But the coolest thing about it is that it works even if you don't believe that it works. You don't have to believe it works. All you have to do is just do it. Right? And so that's beautiful, because that also makes affect labeling very suitable to study in social media, because social media consists of much of text data, like Twitter posts or Facebook updates. So that's the text data, so where we can look for traces of affect labeling, right? And people don't have to believe that it works, and you don't have to be aware of affect labeling for us to study its effects on social media. I'm not going to go into sort of the brain architecture that causes affect labeling to be effective. Right here. But affect labeling in the lab, and most psychologists will notice, is actually very difficult to study. The reason being that you have to measure affect, and usually you have to ask people how they feel. Well, that's kind of like affect labeling, right? So then you expose the subject to emotionally evocative stimuli, so you're trying to evoke a feeling in the subject. And then you have one group that actually performs the affect labeling, and another group that doesn't, and then you measure the affect again. Now that's really difficult to repeat at short time intervals. Right? Because you cannot repeat these measurements too often and too frequently within subjects. So it makes it really difficult to study affect labeling from introspective self-reports. Physical measurements are also tough because it's really difficult to connect into sort of the ground truth of actually people experiencing an emotion. So what I'm going to show you is a demonstration of how we use social media data to study sort of the typical time span and evolution of a naturally occurring emotion. So what we did is we have a database of millions of people here. I mentioned 670,000 because that's a little bit of a standard. But right now we've got tens of millions of people for which we have their entire Twitter timelines, like everything they ever posted over the past 4 or 5 years. We have that available and stored in the database somewhere, and I'm sure some of your timelines might actually be included in that data. Now, what we did is we looked for tweets where someone that matched a very simple pattern, where someone said, I feel, and then followed by a set of positive or negative adverbs or adjectives. Like, I feel good, I feel bad. Like a very unequivocal statement of having a feeling, affect labeling, in other words. And then we took those, we harvested the timelines of those individuals, stacked them on top of each other, because we have the time of the affect labeling, and then we grouped the tweets that were posted before and after that moment of affect labeling in windows of 1 minute or 10 minutes. Right? So we have all of the tweets posted 10 minutes before someone says, I feel good. 20 minutes before they say, I feel good. 10 minutes after, 20 minutes after. And then we can use the magic of natural language processing to actually translate those tweets into a rating of their emotional valence. Right? So how positive or negative were those tweets posted before or after the affect labeling? And then perhaps we might be able to see the effects of affect labeling at the time scale of individual minutes, because we can do this for hundreds of thousands of individuals. So we have a pretty high-powered method to find these differences. So the other thing I would say too is that if the emotion does not affect language, we would have no measurement. Right? Then we'd just have noise. Okay. So here's the result, and I think this is a really cool, nifty result. When I first saw this graph, I did a little bit of a little dance. Because we see a lot of variance here. There's a lot of noise in this data, because we were talking about a couple of 100,000 people essentially having their and a bunch of different affect labeling statements stacked on top. You can see from the positive emotion, you see sort of a cresting positive emotion. At some point, the affect labeling takes place. Someone says, I feel good, and then we have a down-regulation of that emotion immediately following the affect labeling. So that's very suggestive that there's some kind of an interruption in the dynamics of that emotion when someone actually expresses it. But the most important graph, I think, and this is the right hand, the graph on the right hand side, where you can actually see sort of an escalating, sort of an accelerating downward spiral of a negative emotion, followed by someone actually expressing that negative emotion, saying, I feel bad, or I feel terrible, and an almost immediate reversal back to the emotional baseline. And it's very suggestive of the fact that when these individuals expressed their emotion and committed the affect labeling, they immediately down-regulated individually their emotions. So that's really suggestive of course, I want to mention again, because everybody asked this, we did not analyze the emotional statements themselves. So this is a valence that is implicitly expressed in the tweets that were posted before and after. That is a really cool result. In fact, we tried to fit these with exponential functions. Exponential functions gave the best fit. That's also indicative of the fact that there's potentially feedback processes leading to escalating emotions and then an interruption of that escalation by the affect labeling. That is really cool. We also compared this to a null model just to make sure that when people were partying on Friday night, that we weren't comparing those party tweets to non-party tweets like Monday morning, right? So we made sure that we have a null model of tweets that had the same weekday distribution as the observed tweets in that window. And we saw a slight difference between male and female that were suggested that our female Twitter users benefited to a greater degree of negative affect labeling, but I see Peter, the statistics probably says as well as I do, that it's very difficult to draw conclusions from time series that are quite noisy when I'm looking at sort of the distance between the confidence intervals in this case. I've got some really good news for you guys, by the way. If with assuming affect labeling, a negative emotion will not last much longer than an hour. So don't sweat it. If you're not feeling good, just sit it out and it will pass. Okay? It's a little bit like the litany of fear in Dune. Right? Just look behind you, the fear is gone, and the only thing remaining is you. So that's good, but of course, you didn't just come here to hear about me waxing philosophically about sort of fear and science fiction books. But let's also look a little bit about mental health. I mentioned that emotional regulation is really important for mental health. But in our work, we've actually looked directly at depression as well, using similar methods to this. So the nice thing, well, I wouldn't say the nice thing, but in the literature, there's been a sort of a cresting wave of research that's been looking at depression from the point of view of detecting it in social media. I think a very early example is Nurmur de Chudder's work on using Amazon Mechanical Turkers to detect the features that were predictive of a user having depression or not having depression on Twitter. So what they did is they had a set of Mechanical Turkers take just make sure I get it right, the CST and VDI, which are sort of depression survey instruments, and then once the results of those surveys were indicative of that Mechanical Turker having depression, then they were asked for their social media handles. The social media data was harvested, and then they used classifiers to see whether they could predict whether someone had depression or not based on their timeline. There's also a really cool paper, amongst many others, by Eichstätt et al., which was published in PNAS, where they showed that Facebook language can be used to predict depression in medical records. So again, they looked at the content of people's posts, and then trained the classifier to reliably put people in the depression bin or the non-depression bin based on the features of what they post. Now what we did is a little different from that, because again, I like to get ground truth without getting sort of external third-party data or surveys or whatever. I like to believe people when they say things on social media. And here we looked at tweets where people said something similar to something was diagnosed, something with depression today or last week, some clear indication of when that happened. And so as soon as we detect, because we scan Twitter continuously for tweets that match that pattern, and as soon as we find a tweet that matches that pattern, someone actually says that, here's an example, I have been diagnosed with depression, today was really tough, right? We harvest their entire timeline. Now, we can do this for free on the Twitter API. They will only give you the 3,200 most recent tweets, so that's a limitation, but for a lot of people, that's plenty, that covers their entire activity on Twitter. And so we have a starting timeline, that's the earliest tweet we have, and then we have a full timeline of all tweets that these users posted on Twitter. Okay, so you're thinking this is getting a little scary, this guy's spying on our Twitter handles. Everybody is. So I know that it's not much of a defense to say everybody's doing it, but fine. And you might think like, who does that? But it's actually a very common thing. People will announce, I just went to the doctor and guess what, I have depression. Some people will post a prescription note. There's an example right here on Twitter. They will share very intimate details about their diagnosis, their feelings, how they've been diagnosed, other mental health issues that they've been suffering from. So we can be a little flippant about this, and I forgot to actually block the Twitter handles on the slides. I apologize for that, but this is public information. So we don't need IRB approval for this. It's example because it's public, pre-existing data. Am I running? Okay. So they can do really basic things, and I like to keep it simple and stupid. So instead of training a 20-layer deep learning network, I just use a naive Bayesian classifier. At the time when we did this, we had about 130 subjects or individuals that posted a diagnosis of depression online. Now it's running into thousands. We took a random sample of Twitter, and then we trained a naive Bayesian classifier on the basis of the tokens that we extracted, including their part of speech tags, from their Twitter feeds to predict whether a user had depression or not. And this is the best one. We use it for different numbers of features based on the ANOVA values that we obtain for these features. But as you can see, this is ridiculous precision and recall. This is very suspicious. I'm actually a little embarrassed to show these results because they're too good. This is unpublished, and one of the reasons why we've been struggling to get this in a publishable format is that we're trying to understand why these classifiers work so well. Right? And there might be some overfitting going on, even though we try to remove tags such as depression and diagnosis and a variety of mental health issues from the data, but it still works exceptionally well. And to give you an idea of why this might work so well is because the language of people that suffer from depression is so different from the language that you would see for people that are not thus afflicted. For example, here's an example. You can see the non-depressed sort of tags. Okay, I should say these were ranked according to their prevalence, their relative prevalence, and the timelines of these individual users. And you can see, for example, for the non-depressed, what they like to do. They like to laugh. They like to eat meat. They like to talk about sex on the internet, and they like to laugh more. So that's not very uplifting, but this is what the data tells us. Now, on the depressed side, it's actually a lot sadder. You got suicide, stomach issues. We know that the gut is strongly involved in mental health. Gout, mental mistake, and grinning. And so you can see that this is very this is a very sort of polarized, economist view of the language used by people that are afflicted with depression and people who are not, or may not be. And so I do want to caution a little bit, because you have the entire population, and then Twitter, of course, is a subset of the population. I know many of you are thinking, that's not a balanced sample, that's not a representative sample, that's a self-selected sample. I was once a social scientist, so I understand the issues. Although we work very hard to make sure that we have representative samples, and there's ways to do this. But yeah, not everybody that's depressed is on Twitter, obviously, we know this, and then we're looking at a very small subset of those depressed people on Twitter that actually posted a diagnosis. So these might be very special people. So we don't quite know how representative they are of all depressed individuals. But still, we tested this for 50,000 timelines that we had, where people posted at least 100 tweets, and we found that the estimated morbidity on Twitter of depression is about 11.8% at any particular point in time, which I think is higher than the overall population. And when we balance the sample, we see again that the prevalence is higher. And then I should also say that males are overrepresented, so that makes the divergence in, for example, the CDC statistics even more significant. Now, we can do this for groups of people, but we can also do this for individuals, of course. And what these classifiers and this analysis allows us to do is to not just look at depression, but also at sort of the transitions, the dynamics of how other mental health issues develop. For example, we also ran this analysis for people that said online that they were diagnosed with bipolar disorder. I was diagnosed with anxiety and depression. And so we can run our analysis both at the collective level. We can look at whether we can sort of define cohorts of users that have been diagnosed with depression, but we can also look at the dynamics of, for example, someone transitioning from sort of a manic to a depressed state over time, which I think is also really interesting, because that might allow us to look at the antecedents of these transitions, like early warning signals. For example, increased autocorrelation in these time series, increased variance before that transition happens. And that might, I find that really titillating, so to speak, because the hysteresis in these in these dynamics is enormous. So if you could just prevent someone from making that transition by, for example, sending them a tweet, things like, why don't you go for a walk, or make sure you catch enough daylight, or something like that. Perhaps it's not ethical to do this, but I'm thinking that we can actually have automated systems that might push back a little bit against these dynamics. But of course, for that we need complex systems to do this. The other thing, that this is what Marijn Tentey, my postdoc, he's actually an Amsterdam native, is working with in Indiana right now, is that I'm very much aware that a lot of this is expressed in language. And so there's differences between language, and you have to be careful that when you use lexicons where you have like words rated by their valence value, right? That you're not just measuring, for example, how certain cultures of language express emotions. You know, I was raised in Belgium, and I think that how Belgians express their emotions is a little different from, for example, how the Dutch talk about their emotions, and it's very different from how Americans generally talk about their emotions. And so we're working on systems where we're using single value decompositions of these valence versus time matrices, isolating knowing the first signal of value, which would be expected to be language, and essentially removing language from our sentiment data, and hopefully being able to reconstruct what we call an eigenmood, like a mood that exists independent of how it was expressed in language by removing the first signal of value and then approximating the matrix. And so that's something we're working on. It's not published yet, so don't sign me on this, but these are very exciting results as well. Anyway, I have another 10 minutes, but I'll finish on time, I promise. The one thing that we're working on right now is you see sort of that we've been building this toolkit, right? Sort of the depression. And throughout the story, I haven't mentioned yet that a lot of these tweets are geolocated. So it's not just a matter of that we have the content of the tweet and the date and time at which the tweet was posted. We also know from where that tweet was posted. And we have actual GPS coordinates for a lot of these tweets. And just as a basic test, we did this very early work, and I just wanted to share it with you just to show you what we think is possible. We extracted from the Awesome service of the Indiana University Network Institute, through which they provide access to their garden host. Twitter actually donates the garden host to the Institute. Very grateful for them, by the way. And we extracted roughly 17.5 million tweets that were endowed with a geotag, with a geolocation, GPS coordinates. And since we also have data, we have shapefiles for all of US counties, we can determine whether a tweet was posted in a particular county in the US or not. So this is even at the city level, this is at the county level. And so we did something very simple. We just looked at the number of tweets posted in a county as an indication of the population density in that county. I know that's very rough and not quite how you should do it, but then we defined a county as urban if its density if the number of tweets was above the 90th percentile. Very rough, there's other ways to do this, but just as a sort of a quick test of how this was done. And you get something like this, which also, by the way, looks like an election map of the United States. You can see, and this is again what Felix said, population density is not distributed, it's not Gaussian. It's actually very, very skewed. Most of the population of the United States lives in a few population areas, and then there's a whole lot of nothing in between. Right? Well, I wouldn't say nothing, but certainly not high population densities. So you can clearly see that, you can see the population centers between the northeast and the southeast as well as the west clearly show up. And I think that Indianapolis is actually showing this map as well, so that's nice. And then you can do basic things, right? I mean, if you've got urban counties and rural counties, then you can look at markers, like the ones that I just discussed, that would be indicative of mental health issues at that particular location. And we ran a very quick test where we used the ICStat set of features that was recently published, and they looked for those features in the tweets posted from either urban or rural tweets. And what you can see is there seems to be, perhaps it's not statistically significant, but just as a very basic test, not even running fancy classifier zones whatsoever, we see that the proportion of tweets with depression markers does seem to be slightly higher in the urban areas that we've looked at. But of course, this is very coarse-grained analysis across the entire United States, and it's almost a continent. So, but again, you can look at other depression markers, for example, the use of the first personal pronoun. When people make self-referential statements a lot, that's also known to be an indication of depression or mood disorders, also indicative of rumination. And what we see, we get a pretty clear signal there as well, where we see much higher rates of first personal pronoun use in urban areas than in others. We can look at the depression markers I mentioned before, and again, if you normalize it by county population, you can see some patterns showing up. But this is very preliminary data. I want to stress that we're not, we haven't even started the engines on this yet, but this is something that we're working on. What I'm really excited about is that you can see that this is, for example, a map of the urban crisis index in the United States, you see there's quite a bit of overlap between the data that I just showed you and this urban crisis index. So that will enable us to, at a very fine-tuned level, at the county level, to look at, for example, economic distress, income inequality, economic segregation, unaffordable housing, sort of the things that plague cities in general, right? And that might be causative of urban mental health issues. And we'd be able to cross-correlate that with our Twitter measures in real time, right? As populations leave. In fact, just to show you, these are tweets not mapped by county, but by their actual GPS location across the state of New York. You can, of course, see New York City itself being a deep red because that's where everybody is. But these people can be tracked on the basis of their GPS coordinates, so we'd be able to tell how much commuting might contribute to mental health, how much tourism contributes to mental health, because we know whether someone is actually located in a certain position or not. We can look at where, for example, 90% of their activities take place, and then we look at them commute or not, travel to cities, and determine whether that has a distribution, makes a contribution to negative mental health outcomes in the cities as well. So that's really titillating. The one last thing I'm going to mention, because I'm running against the time limit and I do want to finish on time, is that we're using these measures also as a means to look at regional resilience. So this was work done for a grant funded by the Economic Development Agency, and we're very interested to see are some areas in the United States more resilient against perturbation collectively. So for example, when the Houston counties were partly hit by Harvey in August of 2017, you can see a very clear effect of the tweets written from those counties. You can see sort of the fear effect of that hurricane coming to make landfall in Houston, and a very quick recovery right after. And so if you use recovery to a baseline or speed of recovery to a baseline as a measure of resilience, then you can see that those Houston counties were actually quite resilient, emotionally speaking. But if we do that, we can of course look at, I skipped the other guy, we can look at, for example, different hurricanes that make landfalls in different areas, and then look at the speed by which those areas recovered after a hurricane, for example, taking into account the magnitude of the hurricane, etc. But it allows us to not just study public health, but mental health for urban centers, but also sort of the resilience, the collective resilience of entire cities or counties with respect to major natural disasters or others, for example, like an economic collapse, etc. Something we're working on. So I'm going to end here. Just a whole bunch of things I threw out. In terms of future work, what I'm really interested in is understanding better sort of the emotional dynamics of mental health issues. I think it's really interesting to use AI and deep learning, to classify social media users in different bins, and depressed and undepressed, etc. But I think it's much more important to ask questions about the dynamics, the underlying dynamics of how these mental health issues come about, because that will allow us to not just detect when they occur, but it will allow us to, for example, predict when they might occur, look at the early warning signals, etc. Look at their cognitive components. For example, we're looking very much at sort of the semantics of depressed language, which I know is also very important to therapy. And we hope, if I can dream a little bit, that some of this work might lead to more individualized, automated detection and intervention. I think that there's a tremendous demand for help with mental health issues that is often not available, or where the scale of the infrastructure dedicated to mental health issues is inadequate to support the growing demand. So I think I'm really interested in sort of conversational bots and chat bots and their ability to actually intervene in these processes and perhaps sort of make little nudges, not have sort of intervention necessarily, but make little nudges across society that, as a society as a whole, will make us healthier. And just even small contributions, like 1 or 2%, you can prevent like 1% of individuals from dropping into the depression and making that transition. That would be a tremendous advance in public health. So that's something I'm really interested in, and so I think I finished on time for once. This is a first, and so I'll leave it at this, and then we can press the questions.
Thank you for this excellent talk.
No, we
you
actually
should not leave.
we would like to also invite Peter. So for the last 2 talks with the rector in between. Andre will first ask you some questions, and then we also have time for questions from the audience.
Wow, I don't know about you, but I'm feeling like there's a huge amount of information in those 2 talks. I've got 1,000 questions, but let's open it up to people in the audience. Does anybody have a question for Johan and Peter? Yeah. You're in the front row. Do you have a microphone?
I like it. It's on the table.
Yeah, for Mr. Bollen, what's the actual mechanism behind effect labeling? Would effect labeling in an old school diary, like writing it down, have the same effect, or is the effect due to the idea of sharing it and the results you get from the reactions on social media?
Well, as I understand the literature, the act of effect labeling, the production of the speech, the production of the thought itself is disrupts the activity of the amygdala. And that in itself has a regulatory effect. But in social media, it's perfectly possible that someone actually posts something like "I feel bad" on social media, and that then gets sort of supportive messages from their friends. And so we haven't looked at the social component of this as well. But I think it's highly likely that might actually amplify the effect of the affect labeling for social media. So in that sense, when it comes to affect labeling, social media might, for once, be a good thing.
It's interesting, isn't it? As somebody who has spent the majority of the last 10 years on Twitter, and who has also experienced a lot of mental health problems, I was wondering whether I should just throw away all my devices and go and live in the woods. You spoke about the positives and the negatives of social media. Where do you personally feel the balance is?
Well, I'm not on social media, so I killed my account.
So you...
Yeah, I killed my account, yeah.
And is that where you think, as a population, we're going to see a lot more harm than benefits?
Well, I think as Benioff mentioned just recently on, I think it was on a CNBC show, and he got a lot of flack for it, but he essentially said that in the future we might look at social media use as cigarette smoking, and there might in fact be lawsuits, where these companies are being called to task for the damage that they might have inflicted. And it sounds really harsh because obviously I think that Twitter and Facebook have added a lot to society. But I think one of the issues is that they're conceived as social networks. And these social networks, if you look at the sort of the degree distributions, if you look at their exposure models, that feed that runs, that runs across, if you look at sort of the use of addictive technology, for example, the swiping, it's something that the casinos invented. If you combine all of that together, you have sort of an addictive environment that is embedded in the social network that will inevitably lead to the overexposure of individuals that participate in these environments to sort of negative social mechanisms, such as unfavorable social comparisons, overexposure to negative information, the feeling that you're trapped in a bubble, because they're called social media, right? The idea is that you rely on your friends to tell you the news or what's happening, right? So that they rely on these kind of social relationships that otherwise we could very easily isolate ourselves from. So my feeling, I'm ranting here a little bit, my feeling is that it's almost inevitable that social media will have these negative consequences because of the social networking technology that they're relying on. So what I recommend this to my daughter, I recommend it to my wife and my students as well, as to stay off social media as much as you can. I think it's better for you. Just drop the phone, put it away, turn it off, and go out and see your friend, talk to them face to face, or call your mom or something like that. I think that's much more productive.
Any more questions?
I have the feeling I'm a real downer. Party pooper, yes.
It's a clear recommendation. Yes.
I'm Oyana Fleiter. I work for Art Foundation. We focus on trauma treatment and research. I have a question for Mr. Bollen. Do you think that as especially in the West, people become more conscious about their privacy, that the way they communicate on social media will change? For example, if you compare it to China, for example, where they're rolling out their monitoring, facial recognition, etc., where people have to make sure they have their social points in order to get certain public services. Do you think that will have an effect on your research in the future?
Yeah, I think social norms might change. You know, I'm old enough to remember when it was normal to smoke on planes and, you know, smoke in restrooms and in bars and in cars with your kids on the back seat. You know, all of that was completely normal, even recommended. And we had a discussion about that last night. And so I think that social media use, social norms might change, and then yes, then a very valuable window for this kind of research might close. So that's a danger that we have. We might actually have to revert back to sort of the old social science style analysis. But I think honestly, a healthy balance can be achieved. You know, I don't think people necessarily have to overshare. People have become more aware of their privacy and their rights to privacy as well, and the potential of abuses. For example, a government spying on its citizens.